Welcome to Empowered by AI, the podcast for women entrepreneurs ready to harness AI to take their businesses to the next level. I'm your host, Michelle Muncy-Silva, founder of Innovative AI Studios. You may have left corporate life to start this entrepreneurial journey, but you don't have to go it alone. Here, you'll find a supportive community of like-minded women and an invaluable thought partner each week, as my guests and I share actionable insights you can use right away. So let's dive in together. All right, Susi O'Neill, I would love for you to introduce introduce yourself rather to our friends. Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Me on the show. My name is Susi O'Neill. I live in London. If you want to picture the scene, I am minutes away a walk from the beautiful Hyde Park and Notting Hill. If you have Hugh Grant fantasies, that's pretty much where I live, in one of those lovely houses. And I am the founder director of a boutique consultancy called Eva, based in the UK. And I help organizations move past AI hype and take a more human and realistic approach to AI adoption. I work with startups, nonprofits, I work with investors, I work with enterprises, you name it. So I'm all about giving a pragmatic approach to getting on top and succeeding with AI.
I love it. And I've seen you, as I'm following you on LinkedIn, talking about AI without the hype, right?
Yeah.
What does it look like in practice?
The thing is, Michelle, what we're seeing at the moment is that the people who are winning with AI really are their investment firms. They are people like your Deloitte and your Boston Consulting Groups. They're making a lot of money consulting big organizations about really how they need to get on top of AI and putting a lot of fear and the bejeebers into smaller companies that really, if you don't adopt, you're going to die, become outmoded, you're going to become a Kodak. The reality is nothing like that for most industries. And a lot of the people building up this hype, particularly the AI investors and startups, in particular Sam Altman from OpenAI, they need to raise billions of investment in capital infrastructure for data centers and models. So the more that they build this hype and fear of missing out, the more it engages. They're trying to engage. The adoption rates are actually really poor in terms of paid uptake, but it is working for them in driving that uptake. But for us as individuals, not as business owners or us as leaders and managers of businesses, we've got to take a little step back and say, is this realistic? At the end of the day, most AI tools out there, your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, etc., they are, of course, called large language models, or LLMs, and they're predicting words based on common patterns of the past. So really, they're not going to completely revolutionize your way of working. Like, it's good at analyzing text, it's good at analyzing numbers, but it's not going to absolutely transform your business overnight. And so we get this silver bullet effect of saying, Sam Altman said that 95% of marketing jobs would be made default by AI. Now, that's someone who's never worked in marketing, because I have worked in marketing as a content director. What is post-marketing? It's agreeing with stakeholders what a vision is. It's crafting the exact right image with the exact right words that's going to move people to take action and buy your product. And then it's going through 10 rounds of layers of amends with your client. AI is really only going to do a fraction of that setup work or analytics or format shifting work in the production at the end. So it will make a difference. But again, it's hype. And actually, my fear there is that hype is stopping investment in businesses. So we're seeing a retraction of particularly coding jobs, marketing jobs, copywriting jobs. And actually, we need all those skills more so than ever, because all these technologies are actually becoming more used by AI. So it's very important as individuals that we take a step back from hype and we do what I call WAIT, which is working on AI transformation. That's WAIT.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay.
So if you're a business leader or you're just in your life working out how AI fits, if you're self-employed, or if you're how it fits on your pattern, you just say, oh, I am in a process of working on AI transformation. It doesn't have to happen overnight, but it does need to happen. You do need to think consciously about how this technology is going to change your industry. Years ago, I worked in building websites and I got exhausted by the pace of change in the early noughties. At one point, I thought, oh, I'll go and become a potter, someone who makes pottery, because I'll just go and live out in the country and I'll make pottery because that doesn't change. I didn't do that, fortunately, but about 5 or 6 years after I had that thought, you know what I was doing? I was standing up giving a digital marketing class to potters, because their world have been changed by digital media and they needed to understand how to get online and build websites and market themselves. So I realized that you can't stop technology and the flow of it. You have to understand how your work and your practice fits in with the trends that are happening out there in society and with technology.
Yeah. And you've been writing about that. Recent Substack you wrote, this AI transformation is happening to some of us, but not with all of us. And I would love it if you could unpack that a bit.
Shell. So I have a Substack called Rethinking the Hype Cycle. If any listeners would like a trial subscription of it, please just message me. And where I write every few weeks and I unpack all the different trends that are happening with digests and get really into the detail, what practically that looks like. But I also do some positioning and fun stuff for me, things that I think are important for the world. And I recently wrote a piece called Inclusive AI is Survival. This is a book that I'm working on at the moment. The idea is that inclusive AI is about raising all ships. So at the moment, you could say that the closer you are to a Silicon Valley tech bro, the more benefits you as an individual are getting out of AI. And we're starting to see that with every piece of research that I find. So it tends to be people who are on higher incomes, over about $100,000 or euros a year, are getting best access to best tools, the best training. They feel the most confident. We start to see that women in particular, even in the same job role and the same grade, are about 13% less likely to be using AI day to day. And across the board, the numbers are about 25%. And that's been borne out by a collective global study by Harvard Business Review. And then we start to see other layers of intersectionality within that. So people over 50, people who live in rural areas. Also, if you speak English as a second language, the AI tools are not so good. So you're underserved as well. So these are all negating factors. So as a leader, what you need to do is consider all that bucket of challenges and help everyone to get engaged and on board. We start to see in some organizations limiting of licenses, for example, so only certain grades or roles get access to certain tools. And that's perfectly right. So if you don't all need access to image creation tools, for example, it might be fun to create an image of your boss as a cat, but you don't need it. But we do find that two-tier hierarchy of who can have tools and who doesn't is going to, again, penalize particularly women and other intersectional characteristics. So the inclusive AI leader needs to really think about why some people might be reluctant to get involved and use these tools. Maybe they haven't had the training. Maybe they're concerned they're going to get laid off if they do get more productive. The bigger problem we find is that organizations invest in tools and no training. Like even in marketing, only 1 in 2 marketeers surveyed recently had any training. So what's the point in giving people tools? You don't even show them how to use prompting. You don't give them guardrails. You don't show what good looks like. So there's a really active role within team leaders, ideally for external trainers as well, to come in and show what good looks like and start to build those rules around AI tools and usage, because we're starting to see a lot of fragmentation. I'm hearing about young graduates who go to work and are asked to maybe work on a project plan, and they come up with this glorious looking plan, but they don't actually know how the project functions and operates because they've just got ChatGPT to spit out a plan for them and present it back. So we're starting to see that disengagement where people aren't thinking about the work or the craft, either because they don't have the lived experience at work, or they're not getting the support for their managers, or actively being encouraged to do very polished things using tools like ChatGPT, but they don't actually understand the meaning of what they're creating. And that's ultimately what we all need to work towards, because there is evidence of brain rot. Like you forget your childhood phone number that you used to memorize if you're old enough to have gone out and played on the street. But you remember your parents' and your grandparents' phone number and your best friend's phone number. We don't need that information anymore, although it could occasionally be useful. In the same way, we don't need to retain all our bank of knowledge and information all the time. But at the same time, if we lean on tools to give us answers without being critical about where that information is coming from and understanding whether it's the right fit of information for us, whether we really deeply understand the material that we're creating, then we're going to end up in problems, because ultimately, if you don't apply your brain to a tool, you just use AI, then you will be replaced, because you're not adding enough value to your organization or to your customers or clients.
Yeah. And this is such a fine line to walk that it's going to take a really astute team to walk it perfectly. And you've actually coined the term business as unusual when referring to this dilemma. What do you think this means for change management?
I think exciting time, Michelle, to be alive and working in the world. When I started my career, which was around a quarter of a century ago, my job title had no job title. I was web girl. I was building HTML websites for music artists like Wasp, Blackie Lawless. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was a young grad. My company, the record label, didn't know what they were doing either. We were all experimenting and finding our way, but it was a fascinating time to be working because it was the start of the internet. We felt we could do so much. Before e-commerce was a thing, we were practicing web streaming. We were seeing what email marketing looked like. It was a brave new world. Whereas now we're in the Web 2 stage of social media and direct connections with brands, customers, and fans. And now we're in Web 3, but it's a little bit more dystopian than I thought we would be based on the previous ways of technology that I've worked through. That's principally, I think, again, attitudinal. So organizations are taking this silver bullet approach, which is being sold in by the consultancies and the AI firms about productivity. Now, AI can make the individual or the team or the process with the right engineering and investment more productive and great if it shall. But on the whole, that's not really what AI is best at doing. It's best at feeding through new ideas, variations, more things you can test. That's just going to make each individual be able to create more around them, particularly if you're looking at marketing assets where you can never have enough for all the platforms. But it's not actually going to really cut costs. So if you lean in on investing in your people and skills, it's about growing them as individuals rather than saying, let's work out how we can train people up and then get rid of half of them. We'll get rid of the most experienced half or the least experienced half, whichever way the cards fall. It's really about showing you how you can use some of these tools to embed growth and opportunity or be able to take on new service areas, new lines of work that would have been hard to do. The companies that do that, again, if you're just having pockets of innovation where the people who are most proactive or have the most uptake use AI tools, which typically is less female skewed as well, what you find is you'll get pockets of innovation and pockets of growth. But imagine if everyone in your organization felt empowered and confident to use the AI tools. You'd get great in return on investment on those tools. It would feel like a positive thing and you'd all be growing. All the boats would be raised and everyone would be benefiting from that opportunity. And on the counter side, if you don't invest in people, we're starting to see people who are ambitious about their careers walk away if they don't have access to the tools and training.
And it really, one of the things that you're talking about here, this is unveiling for me, is trust. It's like, where is the trust? And why do you think that trust is such a fragile but critical still component in introducing AI into an organization? Is it the fear that's really dominating?
There's that tiny part in two areas, Michelle. So one is actually about your customers. So what we're seeing is a lot of companies are just throwing AI in the mix. It's partly to show they're progressive and investing in technology. Sometimes it's to add shareholder value, particularly around the conversations around job cuts. But I've seen ludicrous examples like AI-powered wine. We're seeing a partnership now between Mattel and OpenAI around possibly an AI-powered Barbie. Do we really need AI in all these contexts? Maybe in the background operating processes, but it's not necessarily the selling point. And Edelman do a trust barometer survey every year, which is fascinating. And some of those questions are about people's attitudes towards technology. The reason it's such a good study is I think they interview people in 28 or 30 countries from all different demographics and backgrounds. And what we see is that it's a very even split at the moment. So in the past, people were very trusting of technology firms in general. Now they're much more mistrusting, particularly AI firms. We see it's a even split. So about 1 in 3 people is fairly enthusiastic about AI, 1 in 3 about neutral, and about 1 in 3 mistrusting. So if you go hard on your AI message, there's possibly 1/3 to half of people who either don't care or are put off by your product and service. What's interesting underneath that is that in the global South countries, Europe, North America, there's more mistrust. And particularly women and older people, even more mistrust. So if that's your demographic, don't go hard on the AI message. It might not be what people want to hear. And I feel that's a bit like saying, oh, we're surfing the web, which is something people used to say 20 years ago. We don't need to say that as a background technology. You've got to say, we're investing in new technologies to optimize your customer experience. So when you put a call into our call center, you'll just be able to ask a few questions and we'll be able to get you to a solution quicker. Your goods will be returned quicker, arrive at your house. You'll get more customization This is why it benefits you. So it's really, we need to lean into the benefits, not the features, the customers. And when it comes to teams, it's just really interesting. I've been part of a group of product managers from Europe, and we've been discussing how we build AI in product teams. And a lot of it is about psychological safety. So if teams feel it's okay to raise their hands, ask for tech, or try out different use cases or ideas, and even if they don't work, they're not going to be criticized, then that's a very positive thing. We also see the challenge with time. So if AI becomes a side of desk activity without time allocated towards professional training and uptake, which group of people are least likely to get upskilled? It's older women. They've got a lot of caring responsibilities. They've got a lot of other side of desk things that they've taken on at work. And that's just not fair. That's really not fair on that group. Building that bank, and I think it's very specific to teams and individuals. Organizations can put in governance and guardrails. They can put in usage policies. They can put in ethical guidelines, which is what they should be doing. But at the individual level, the team leaders need to look at it and say, what's a good use case for us and what isn't? Even as a simple example, for example, we talked about meeting summaries. So that seems like a low-hanging fruit. Absolutely. Who on earth would type up meeting notes in this day and age? But what about if it's a board level meeting? Though that's a skill, writing up what was said in the room in a careful way. Do you want to delegate that entirely to AI? Or do you want to have a human in the loop, or even have a human originate those notes and then edit it through AI? So every use case is different, every team is different, every individual is different. Which is why it's more fascinating and why it's harder to make general sweeping statements about AI productivity, because you just don't know how much repetitive, process data-driven or text-driven work is happening at the individual level. You'll only know that by measuring. So part of the inclusive AI approach is for your team lead, the organization setting up a framework, but for each team leader to really look and see and take a sense check around every quarter of what training have we put in place, what processes and systems have it worked with, how much time do we think we've saved, what new innovations have we brought as a result of either the time saved or the new technology implemented. So it's taking a very measured approach rather than hyperbole of saying 90% productivity gains. It's looking at it stage by stage, period by period, and really tracking what the results and gains are.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, do you feel like there are some warning signs that an organization should be looking at to check for fragmenting instead of transforming?
Talking about this idea that if you are all transforming together, that there's a sense of fragmentation. Now, where I'm from in England is a place called the Midlands, and it was famous for a group of political people called the Luddites. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they were the people who destroyed the machines, the weaving machines with hammers. And there's a lot of talk about them right now, which is super interesting. There's even a term called the Neo-Luddites. So what the Luddites did was they weren't against technology. Their way of life was being disintegrated. They could not feed their children. They were starving to death. And their only option was to move to become effectively like serfs in factories, but have much more lower level, really degrading work. And they were fighting for their way of life. So they're a very powerful group of people who ultimately did get somewhere. They did create some laws. They did delay that technology, but only for a short time. So the neo-Luddites now are people who understand all of the technology that's happening, but they might commit some internal cybercrime, right? Because they don't want some technology to work. So that's what we don't want. What we do want is just to have people who feel that they have a narrative, that the story around how this digital transformation and now the AI transformation is changing their roles for the better and what role they will play. Customer services being a great example, because we've all been in call centers where it's taken an hour to just get an address changed. That would be crazy nowadays. We'd expect that to be done through a chatbot or through an email form. And it's the same with AI. We would want to have those customer service agents being supported with technology to speed up that process and give you better answers, better information about products, for example. So it's about saying that you can have a higher value role. It can be more skilled. This is what the transformation looks like. Now, if you see pockets where you're getting some great use cases, perhaps coming out of your dev or tech teams, but other parts of the organization aren't really doing much, then you've got a fragmentation problem. And do you know where a lot of the bottlenecks happen around adoption? It's not at the bottom, it's at the top. So I was at a session yesterday with some women leaders, and one said that they'd done a survey of large companies, and they found that it implemented AI adoption, but the uptake of the leadership was around 6% of the tools that they invested in the business. So if only 6% of leaders are bringing AI in a walk, they're not walking the walk. It's a bit like saying everyone's got to work from the office 3 or 4 days a week, but they just work from home like every day, except once a month.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You need to show, and also because we're going to get things wrong. So it's important that leaders share some of that vulnerability of, I've tried in my life to do this with AI and it didn't work. Or I tried to do this and this is the results I did get. Here's some learnings. So showing that learning curve and that vulnerability is also important. But it's really important for leaders of organizations and also leaders of teams, not just to implement technology, but to also play their part in using it as well.
Yeah. And so many times I think we get stuck in the fact that it's not just a checklist, right? This isn't just a checklist. To actually implement, you need to bring your experience, your perspective to the table, and you need to be looking for perspectives different than yours to create the whole picture. And I know that you've written about, speaking of perspective, this systemic underrepresentation of the woman's perspective and older workers as well in AI. So do you feel like there's some practical actions that we can take to help close the gaps?
Challenges in the societal. So I'm not into doomsaying and saying it's always going to be like that. We do know that the tech industry as a whole doesn't have so many women in tech roles. It's typically stuck in around 1 in 5. And even in the industry itself, like I worked in the cybersecurity industry, where most of the women that did work there were in roles like mine, marketing, admin, and business and sales. But still, we need to provide as welcoming environments as possible, thinking inclusively about recruitment. I know, but particularly countries like America, that's very difficult nowadays. As individual business leaders, perhaps we can move against that tide and say that it is important to have inclusive recruitment, particularly. The bigger problem we particularly see for women and people of colour is that the systems themselves do have bias because it's learning from the data of the past. So some time ago, I tried desperately to create an AI image of a female surgeon, which is always this case that there's just no imagery of female surgeons. And when people think of a surgeon, they think of a man. And I just could not get the tool to produce a single image of a female surgeon. It just produced lots of images of female nurses doing surgery or male nurses with a woman standing in the background. I tried so many times. It did not have the historic data to trade off. And we see that across the board. So if we're creating AI text as well, you think it's coming in imagery, but it's more likely if you create a story or a case study, it's more likely to lean on words like power and leadership for men and nurturing types of words for women. So it's embedded there, that bias in the system. I always think we just need to produce better content as a writer, produce better content out there. And hopefully the training data will learn, trying to correct things that come out of systems where there might be some gender or discriminatory language in particular that might have become slightly stuck in that space. It's a long curve. And the other issue I have, well, for women, I would always encourage women to try and do your best to take up these technologies, is we have a sense that a lot of women are less likely to use AI because they're conditioned from school to have this idea of good girl conditioning. And there was actually a study done with Norwegian business students where they were given tasks. Some were told, oh, your professor doesn't want you to use AI, or he does want you to use AI. And the women were more likely to say, I won't do it. I won't use it. And the men were more likely to say, yeah, I would do it anyway. It's the idea that some of these tools, particularly like summarization tools or content creation tools, are shortcuts. And we're taught at school to show your work. So we have to shake out that systematic way of thinking. Oh, well, I'm not good enough. I have to prove how I work. I have to work longer and do it the long way. But if men are taking lots of shortcuts and you're not, you're going to be behind. So I think that's something we need to be conscious of as women in the educational upbringing we've had, to push against that and just always be finding little experiments. So I write, and I'm not a heavy AI user. I use it for creating bits of imagery from lines with proposals, but I had some real bad fails of trying to get it to do stuff to help me with my sales pipelines. I keep trying again a bit later using a new tool, and I'm determined to keep trying whatever technology comes along, even if I don't have immediate successes or immediate returns on that test, because I see it as an experiment.
Mm-hmm. And being okay with that is sometimes very difficult, because when I present and I ask presenters, what is lingering for you that makes you hesitant or increases your frustration? They will inevitably say perfection. I want to show, like you said, I love that you brought up the psychology behind that, where it was, I need to show my work because I'm demonstrating proficiency. I'm demonstrating why I'm in this room. I need to not take any shortcuts. It needs to be this long, detailed process. And I would add to it, just based on my experience, it needs to be perfect. And that's
Perfection is the enemy of progress. Some great philosophers and ways of life. It's interesting is a lot of these AI tools, again, they may be hyped and told that you're going to get brilliant sales results or brilliant personalized emails out of them. But do you know what? You're not that hype as well. So expecting these tools to help you deliver perfection is a flawed strategy in itself. You have to accept the fact that it's an emerging technology and work with it. So it's more about gathering ideas, doing things at a higher volume, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, particularly on the sales side, than it is about saying this tool is going to help me become more perfect at the thing I do.
Yeah. And your inclusive AI model really emphasizes that importance of psychological safety. What are some examples that you can share with us of how you've seen this successfully implemented or either completely overlooked?
But I tend to get in the media. The things that do work often don't, actually. So some examples that haven't worked lately that were well publicized, apologies if you've heard them before, but Klarna tried to get rid of about 600 customer service agents, as customer service being a low-hanging fruit for automation. And then they ended up rehiring them, upskilled with AI tools in gig working roles, so less secure work. And this is where we see, again, AI fragmenting. But ultimately, the CEO was quite upfront and said, we use cost as a driver. So clearly what happened is it wasn't working. They were getting more complaints. And do you know what? Us customers, we're really strange creatures. We don't ask things in a consistent way. We're not binary. We're A, B, or C choice. And that's part of the problem that AI, if it works on language patterns or it works on what's called a RAG system, where it's processing against existing data, we just present our problems in different ways with different language every time. And again, there's a bias that can creep in there, where people who speak non-native English speakers or even women's voices aren't recognized by voice recognition systems. So we have to be aware of that when we're cutting those kind of corners, really, and making sure that the technology does work with people in the loop. And there was another example recently with Duolingo, where again, they said we're going to get rid of all our contractors and a lot of our content's going to be AI driven. I have some strong feelings about this as someone who's tried to use Duolingo to learn a language and failed. I think it's a bad learning app, but the idea of putting a gamified learning app, putting AI without the learning and cognitive elements in there, it's just doomed to fail, really. And there was a big backlash, and actually customers left the app as well. So the CEO had to backtrack on that. So it's always about technology plus people. Be very careful about what you put out in the world, those statements, if you're a publicly listed company or you're trying to get investment. On the flip side, I've been working recently with a large fintech firm called Finastra, and they have a brilliant inclusive AI program. So every year they have a 2-day conference online for their staff all over the world. I've come to talk to them about the gender disparities in AI, and they have some excellent speakers. And it's all about having sessions that you can jump into or listen to recordings that help bring everyone along in that global organization at the same time. And it really does feel like everybody's got an opportunity to learn together. Everybody's been given dedicated time to do that activity. The other example that I've read about is it's a French waste management company called Veolia, and they have 220,000 employees. Yet they've given every employee access, if they want it, to an AI tool. Now, that's super expensive, and through the licensing cost there, but they've done it in a really smart way. So they've approved various different large language models, accepting that people in their personal lives are using different ones, and they let people draw in and use the ones they want for specific purposes. So not everyone can use it to create images, which is quite an expensive piece of processing. But by doing that, they actually also save cost, because instead of paying for a license, they're paying the vendors for the data usage, which is much more affordable. Then if people aren't using the tools, they're not paying that whatever $30 a month license for a tool that's gathering dust. So that's a really ingenious way. Certainly bigger organizations could do it. I'd love to know or get examples if you're in a smaller organization of how you're building these kind of models, building efficiencies as well. And I'd love to also showcase any examples of good practice with AI learning in my newsletter. So please do get in touch.
I love it. And finally, our last kind of endeavor in this with you is I really want to know, as someone who moves between multiple creative endeavors, I know you've talked a lot about imagery and creativity, but you're also moving between that and enterprise AI strategy. So what inspires you to keep pushing boundaries both creatively and professionally?
Interesting question, Michelle, because I don't think I've had a linear career. It was actually a great event yesterday. We were talking about adaptive career paths. And what the speaker, Melissa, was saying was that the women are particularly good at this because we've had situations where we've had to take a step back, a redundancy, a caring duty, maternity leave. We've had to keep shifting shape and changing. Anyone who's ever worked in marketing for more than a few years knows that adaptation is the bumpy path that we're all on. I started out as an indie musician. I used to be playing indie bands. I then started to play this instrument called the theremin, and I was known as Britain's third best theremin player. I played for Simon Cowell on Britain's Got Talent. The audition, so I got to a certain stage, but I didn't get so far. So I started out as a musician, unwittingly ended up in digital marketing through crazy record labels and TV companies. Later worked in investment, public sector investment for governments, and then went back into agencies, the big ad agencies like Ogilvy as a content director. So I've had a very non-linear career path. But interestingly, this adaptability that people who've changed and shape-shifted in their career, this is what we need with AI because we can't predict its business as unusual. We don't know what's coming down the road. And if you're used to chopping and changing, spinning lots of hats as an AI agent, and you can become a really valuable resource in a company that's scaling up. So those skills that before were seen as, well, this person isn't maybe so serious about their career path could be really what we need in the AI age. And I really hope organizations can take some risks on people who aren't from technical backgrounds to add a lot more value in the AI age. I always say I've had more twists and turns in my career than a game of Nokia Snake. But I think AI will continue that. We don't know. There's no point. Businesses don't need a 5-year plan anymore. We just need to have a vision of where we're trying to get to in the next year or two as an individual, as a team, as an organization, what role technology might play. And then we just need to roll with the changes.
And in that time of revolution, if you will, of uncertainty, we are so grateful to have you share your thoughts with us and your experience. So thank you for that.
Please all do get in touch. It's Rethinking the Hype Cycle on Substack. I'd love to have your listeners join me, and I'll give you all a membership. And hope to see you online.
That will be fantastic. And we want to put those links in the show notes. So you're going to share those, and we're going to make sure we put those out there for people to connect with. And thank you again for your time. Thank you for tuning in to Empowered by AI. If today's episode sparked ideas, don't wait. Follow the link in the show notes to visit innovativeaistudio.com and download your free resource created to help you put today's insights into practice. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes packed with more tips, tools, and inspiring stories. Until next time, stay empowered and keep innovating.